Hi, I am Nick Joseph Saul. I am the chair of the finance committee. The time is 6:46 p.m. on Tuesday, September 16th, 2025. And I am calling this finance committee meeting to order. Members present include the chair, Corey Taylor and Greg Clement. We have a few items on the agenda today. First is the police department educational incentive. And the way I understand it, there is an issue with the wording and the interpretation of a section in the collective bargaining agreement, where police officers are incentivized for completing levels of higher education. The language reads, educational bonus for employees that have earned them. Each degree will earn the employee 2% more than their current pay. An extra 2% will be earned for each consecutive degree. The issue was that the way it was interpreted, police officers who had an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, and a master's degree were receiving like a 6% incentive, but police officers who just had a bachelor's degree and a master's degree were receiving a 4% incentive. And so the memorandum that was sent to us clarifies the wording so that police officers with an associate's degree as their highest level of education receive a 2% incentive. Bachelor's degree as highest, 4% incentive, and then a master's degree as highest is the 6% incentive.
Yeah, the previous wording was basically they had to stack all three types of degree to reach the max 6% incentive. The new wording just caps each degree as a set percentage.
Mm-hmm.
The specific instance we have is we have an officer with a bachelor's and a master's, but no associates, so he gets a 4% incentive. Where we have I think two officers that have associates and a bachelor's that also get a 4% incentive. So there's kind of a disparity there. Yeah. For someone who's achieved a master's instead of a bachelor's.
So is that shortfall that was listed, is that only going to one person then?
It would apply to everyone, but currently it only applies to one person.
Okay. That's a pretty significant shortfall.
No, the shortfall we're gonna get to later. But
it's not pertaining specifically to that.
No,
This is an isolated thing.
Yeah. Whoa. Yeah.
But with that in mind, like what the change in the agreement wording, the clarification here, what can you tell me about how that will impact the budget projections?
That would end up being provided everything's backdated, it would be a 2% increase from the date that it's enacted on that one officer's base rate of pay.
Okay, that's.
And has he been here through the life of the new contract, or it would only go back if he came in after that new contract was in?
He signed in August of last year.
So it'll go through August of last year.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Because that contract was enacted in backdated to the beginning of last year.
Yeah, it was enacted in June or July and then backdated to January.
Yeah. Right. So that's a 2% over the last year.
Pretty much. I don't know if it was salary for that period of time.
Okay.
That's the year. Quick math, do you think it could be about?
What's officer's name?
Quan. Richard Quan.
I'll get you something in an email.
Okay.
I don't wanna speak out of turn, but I'll get that.
Regardless,
What's
though,
the
how do we
regular
agree?
review?
How do we agree about the memorandum of understanding? I mean, as far as the interpretation of it.
I think it's much clearer than what existed before. And it like standardizes all police officers who have an associate's degree at the highest level of education are at the same incentive level and so on for bachelor's and master's degrees. I think that's pretty fair. And
Yeah, alternatively, in the previous wording, if someone just had a bachelor's and didn't get associates on the way, they would only get a 2% increase.
Yeah, and that doesn't make sense really, because, I mean, the bachelor's is valued higher, so you invested 2 more years of your life for that. So.
I personally am inclined to hold off on making any recommendations to council until we're able to look at what the numbers are. Especially because we're gonna be discussing the staffing shortfall. Rather than addressing this now, and I'm not sure if we're gonna be able to come to a decision on the budget shortfall tonight either. But if I'd like to keep an eye on both of those ideas as more information becomes available.
Yeah, that's fine. That's perfectly understandable. That's why I kind of tried to bring this to everyone's attention now, so we have time to look at all the options, consider everything before we handle it. Urgent problem we're going to brush and whatever.
Dispatching. What is the dispatching shortfall?
So there's a, do we want to close discussion on the educational incentive and move to that agenda item?
Well, I'm just curious. Yeah, we can either way. Just I want to understand what the dispatching shortfall is.
It has nothing to do with dispatching. As far as I understand, unless the dispatcher.
It's a salary line.
Yeah.
Salary line issue.
Okay.
Yeah. But do either of you have any additional thoughts or questions or comments on the educational incentive memorandum?
I mean, I don't, it makes sense. I don't know how, I mean, I understand why we're dealing with it now for clarification of the contract. To me, it just shows that that whole contract was maybe written in haste. Had we had our auditor and attorney present in those negotiations, we wouldn't have any, we've had, I don't know, how many MOUs have we had since that was
I
adopted?
think there's only been 1 or 2, but there is significant.
I think there's,
areas.
feels like there's been more, but, but yeah, and they've been significant, costs to the city at the end of the day when the MOUs have come through, and this will be too at 2%, even at, you know, I mean, still going to be a very large chunk of change at one sum.
Yeah, and you said, by the way, it's just, he was hired August 2024. Yes. So that's when it would be allocated.
Yeah. So, and I don't know how that's going to play out too from a tax perspective, because if it has to go back in the line item from August 2024 to December 2024 for that period, now you're talking about putting that on last year's and then redoing, you know, W-2s, and that's just going to be an additional expense, and it's probably going to be a ding on the audit. I'm just saying, this is another, you know, problematic situation. Unfortunately,
Yes.
it's not, is the problem itself is very simple, and I understand it, but it creates a lot of other ancillary issues. So, but as far as the officer, I agree. I think he's got a bachelor's and a master's. He should be getting that 6% bump. That only makes sense from the contract, and I think he's due it.
Yes, this question came up before, but we were pretty well handcuffed into what the CBA was. Because as you said, it was done hastily and, I don't think the right people had input in it. And this is what, year 2 of the 3-year?
Yeah.
So we have one more year before things can be addressed with the CBA.
Right.
Sorry, and I apologize if this was already stated. Is his current salary like an accurate reflection of the fact that he has a master's degree? Or are we just talking about backdating pay for a certain amount? Or his current compensation is not reflective of that as well?
His current compensation is not.
Okay.
His current compensation is the 4%.
Okay.
And I think before we move forward, I think we need to have the city manager and or you, let's review that CBA all the way through with everybody so that this doesn't come up
Again,
again.
okay,
Let's get a total
let's do it one time.
status of where we are at to make sure that we don't deal with this again.
Mr. Tolliver, Chief Tolliver, do you know if, Mr. Rowe has had the opportunity to review that entire contract?
I know I've sent the completed contract to him. I don't know that he's had time to go through and do a detailed review on it.
Maybe we can have Mr. Rowe do that and then just review it and then just, because we need to,
Bust out the ready.
yeah, you bet. So,
The negotiations for the next 3-year, agreement, would that start next year or 2027?
it'll start next year.
Yeah, it'll start towards the end of next year, middle to end of next year.
Okay. Okay,
Sorry to prolong the discussion.
no, yeah, I think everything that's been said, tonight about this item has been valuable, like just things to think about as we make these, decisions and evaluate, the consequences of making these decisions. So I'm actually going to jump ahead. Do we need to amend the agenda if we jump ahead?
No,
Okay, great.
not for committees, you're good.
Okay, let's talk about the police department, staffing budget shortfall. Were you able to put together summaries?
Yeah.
Okay,
I don't know how much use this will be to you. I'm gonna walk you through it.
Thank
If it doesn't make sense. I also took the liberty of basically using the same methodology that I used for police for fire. This is just another big department. So on the sheet here, you know, basically we just want to figure out like how much are we averaging per pay period? How many pay periods we have left? How much do we have in the balance versus how much is that going to cost? And what's the difference? And so with 8 pay periods left, we're averaging 36,000 a pay period. That means that we're going to be spending about 289,000 over the course of the rest of the year, with a balance in that line item of 185,000. You know, as for why is it so far off? That was my very first question, and I was told, frankly, it's the CBA, and maybe a little inflation as well. You could argue, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how that will work with salaries necessarily, but yeah, that's kind of what it boils down to.
when you say it boils down to the CBA, is it like overtime? Is it miscalculated benefits?
Well, Devin,
So
has
it's
good
actually,
news about that.
yes, that went on overtime.
Okay,
So I checked on overtime this year. Currently, we're sitting at like 1,100 hours of overtime from January 1st to today. Last year, for the total year, it was 2,400 hours total. So overtime's down. And on top of that, about 500-ish hours of the overtime were related to holiday pay. So the overtime's down. I think the real problem is where the CBA didn't get implemented until about the middle of last year. Last year's salary budget was based off the normal pay rates. It wasn't adjusted. It was adjusted for, I believe, like a 4% increase, I think is what Taylor did. Which obviously the raises were greater than 4%.
It could have been 8% because that was originally,
It might have been.
was the original guidance that was given to the city manager at the time.
Yeah. So the original salary, budget line for last year was short. When it was implemented about halfway through the year, the auditor then did a separate appropriation for a pretty large chunk of money that he thought would cover it through the rest of the year. It was $300,000, somewhere around that size of a figure. Even towards the end of last year, that did come short, but there were other funds, like the retirement line or one of the other line items that Taylor was able to move to cover us for the last month or two. So this is the first full year that the CBA has been in effect. So I just believe that the initial calculation for the costs and the benefit packages weren't high enough.
Okay.
Just due to a lot of the confounding language in that CBA.
Yeah, and this next budget cycle, we're gonna need to ensure that we factor in those cost of living adjustments in the third year of the contract, as well as a K-9 officer coming on.
Right.
There's gonna be additional compensation there, so we just need to make sure we also have those line items in for next year's budget, so you don't run into that same issue there.
But I will be working on MOU for the K-9 office coming up as well. We'll probably include a small things and not anything drastic.
Yeah, that's something we, I think, are anticipating, so.
So do these projections include officers' benefits and those type of things? Or is this just straight
This is
salary?
just salary.
Strictly salary.
Okay.
If we were to appropriate funds, in preparation for the shortfall, what would the, general fund balance be, or like, would all of that come out of the general fund?
I think it has to come out of the unappropriated.
Yeah.
Balance, that is, yeah.
What is the balance right now, and
Well, it's hard, we can only estimate the unappropriated balance when it
Yeah.
isn't the beginning of the year, the end of the year, so I don't know. But I can get an estimate,
okay,
because you're basically you have to take your current balance and then combine that with your projected revenue. And like,
Mhm.
that's what your unappropriated balance or carryover should be. But we don't really, we know how much is in the bank, I know we have enough to cover it. But, I did look at, the individual line items within the 100 fund to see if it was realistic to try to move money within the fund and not both, and I don't know that it is.
okay. Could
Because
it
you're,
partially be?
yeah, I just don't know if you're gonna put a meaningful dent in something like $100,000. But yeah, partially, there's something, the biggest ones like retirement match or retirement pickup, I'm nervous to touch because I'm not familiar enough with the cycles of when those get pulled on.
Okay,
So like right now, the retirement match is, only 53% used, roughly 70% through the year, but I don't know how often that gets hit exactly. So I would be nervous to like take out of that saying, oh, well, we've got all this margin here, and it turns out we don't.
Right.
So I can look into that more closely if you all really feel like we need to try to stay within the fund, we can do our best. But I don't know how
let's
realistic it is.
find out what we can do.
Sure.
And between that and, appropriating money from the general fund, how it could affect, the balance and whether or not, that would bring us anywhere close to like fiscal oversight thresholds.
I'm not sure that I know what that means.
Like, chapter 118 of the Ohio Revised Code, where the state auditor's office,
Yeah, we should be all
at,
right for that.
okay, all right.
Yeah.
It's like the caution, fiscal caution, fiscal watch, and fiscal emergency
Okay.
thresholds. I just wanted to make sure we weren't in danger of going into caution,
Yeah.
or, yeah.
I should be okay there. My concern is I'm actually thinking the opposite direction. So 103 might be a conservative estimate. I don't think we're gonna probably have enough money in the other line items to be able to offset the 103. I'm concerned that the 103 might not be enough, because when,
We
If you-
don't want to consider adding a buffer.
Yeah,
because
and
if we're adding the 103 for the salaries side of it, that increases all the other line items like the benefits side,
Right.
because those are all based on a percentage. So if the original amount that was budgeted for the salary is an amount, and that amount wasn't in there, you may not even have enough in the other line items for retirement, et cetera, because those OPERS and stuff may be going up as well. And I think Mr. Smith is right, like, when those poll, yeah, you wanna make sure your money's.
And to the point about, adding a buffer, like, I mean, if any of these is a single standard deviation off, then we haven't appropriated enough. If we just do 103,000 and then you're like, we're back here again in December, God, whenever, like scrambling to try to finish out the year.
So with this awareness, in the midst of 2026 budget preparations, do you feel like you have enough information to help guide the budget preparation process in a way that makes this less likely to happen? Or if it does happen, it's less significant at the end of next year?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I have, by ordinance, I have an obligation to provide a budget that has, by Ohio revised code, the total has to be, the grand total has to be balanced, but the charter has an additional requirement that I think police, fire, maybe a couple other of these salary lines also have to be balanced or projected to be balanced by the end of the year. So I have to, we have to. And as far as getting, an accurate one, nobody can predict the future, but we're gonna definitely do the best we can and account for, obviously, the new contracts, the cost of living increases, the K-9 unit. We're gonna do our best to try to look around the corner, but, it's part of a thing we're talking about later, but this is also partly why we have this ordinance every year, because we don't know the future, and so at the end of the year, we have to, clean up the books, but, yeah, we're gonna do our best.
While I look over the rest of the questions that I prepared to make sure, like, some of these have been answered, but I don't know if all of them have been. Do either of you have any additional thoughts or questions about this?
I don't, I would just look and ensure that, 103 is actually.
Yeah, and I would suggest a 15% buffer probably on that.
So, but based on this, does that mean we're on a shortfall for the fire department also?
Using the same exact methodology, I didn't do it for any other departments because I didn't feel it was appropriate. I think that averaging makes sense when you have a fairly large and stable set of employees, but we have issues too with the city manager's secretary and the code officer, for example, but it wouldn't be appropriate to use that same methodology because Austin came in 4 months ago. And so I could try to do something comparable with those and I probably will, whether you want me to or not, but I think I'm nervous as I get into it that we have this problem on a lot of our salary lines throughout the city, frankly. So, I'll definitely, you'll get an email from me with, others once I figure out a good methodology for these kind of smaller departments where that method doesn't make as much sense. But yes, I do think we have about 20,000 shortfall for fire as well.
Okay. Yeah, as soon as you are able to, assess the other department budgets, I think we'd be very interested to know if any other departments are expecting a significant shortfall this year.
Sure.
What's up?
I have one other small shortfall once we wrap up the salary shortfall.
Oh, okay. All right.
Look at you coming to the table.
So this kind of sidetracks, but yet doesn't. When do you project you'll have the initial 26 budget before the committee?
Yeah, I made a timeline, so I don't know if you want to save that for that.
Yeah, if I'm sidetracking at this point, I was just curious where,
Yeah.
how this plays into that.
Yeah, I mean, they interplay. As I think about the budget, I'm like using this as like a lesson of like, oh, okay, we want to learn from this and try to get closer to the mark.
It's a new data point.
So, yeah. So,
You can answer that question later.
Yeah.
There are some things that I want to understand about staffing within the police department. And I've just never asked these questions before. So what is the current authorized staffing versus actual staffing? Or how many officers are on payroll now compared to what was budgeted?
Our current staffing is the max allowed staffing.
Okay,
So it's 1 chief, 1 SRO, 2 sergeants, 8 officers,
mhm,
and a clerk.
okay. How, do you know how that compares with similar sized cities and towns? Like, are we over or understaffed relative to population and crime rates?
Relative to population, we're probably fairly averagely staffed. In terms of our call volume, I feel we're understaffed.
Okay, that's good to know.
So the SRO officer, that cost is offset by,
Yeah, so the SRO is paid by the city, but then the city is reimbursed from
By the
the
school
school.
district,
Yeah,
okay.
they send us a quarterly reimbursement. I believe that.
I don't know.
I think it's quarterly.
Is it possible that it's time to consider alternative staffing models such as civilian support staff, regional or shared services, or reserve officers? I mean, like, I would hate to disrupt the staffing of the police department, and the jobs of the people involved. It's a big number to
Yeah.
wrap my head around, and so I've got a lot of
so-
questions.
Civilian support staff, wouldn't really be of much assistance.
No.
We're not having a lot of administrative work being done. It's all responding to calls and
Okay.
providing those services as peace officers.
Mhm.
Adding reserve personnel, I don't think will work here quite personally, due to the current shortages in officers already. No one wants to work as a reserve officer working for either volunteering their time or working for a pretty reduced salary.
Okay,
Not realistic in terms of that. Just
And
for
I would
instance, I put
imagine-
out an eligibility roster that we're trying to build and received 1 application. So getting staffing is pretty difficult.
okay.
Currently.
I would imagine that, like other, like surrounding areas, departments and the county sheriff's department and et cetera, are probably see themselves as understaffed as well. So it could be difficult to share resources that way.
It is.
Okay.
We do a pretty good job working with the sheriff's office for assistance if we have, if there's only 1 officer here in town at night for some reason, the sheriff's office is good about responding to the system as well. They provide us a lot of services in terms of, they have detectives that work in specifically with child crimes. So almost all of our child cases in town get handed off to them. They do all the investigations, so they help us in that manner as well.
Okay.
So we do shift some workload over to the sheriff's office, and that's just a service they provide free of charge.
and if I could add to that, contrary to some belief in the community, we do not have a contract with the sheriff's office that costs us any funding.
Correct.
Correct.
We pay them $0 for it.
Exactly. And, that's been, that subject has been approached a few times in the last few months, but it's not true.
You know,
Chief, how's the impact of the college disbanding their police department affected yours?
We received some calls over there. Quite a few thefts, handful of assaults here and there, disorderly conduct, and a couple intoxications. The one that takes up most of our time and resources is mental health calls. That's kind of across the board, though. Those type of calls just take more time. And that age group at the college is kind of starting to become prone to having these kind of small mental health breaks due to just the age they are, the addition of stress of being in college, being away from home, being away from their support groups. So
it's affected your department by having more calls, it sounds like. And what about on the other side of that, what about like mutual aid? Is you had them as a mutual aid component too. So does that affect, I know you said overtime's down, but like, does that impact your staffing levels and?
no, not significantly. It was nice before when they would have an officer 24/7, but you could count on them to come if you needed extra hands for something. If you got really busy and, Officer A was on the west side of town and Officer B got a call on the east side of town, and someone started having problems, they could ask for the college unit to come. That was nice to have. Stay by the time, man.
Going back to the budget side of things, what do you two think about, adopting like quarterly budget to actual reporting to council? Like doing something like what you've done here, but on a quarterly basis, so these shortfalls can be identified earlier when they happen.
Seems like a good idea.
Okay.
I mean, I think the only, and, we'll get into this more when we talk about the 2026 budget, but, right now we're in this tight spot where the treasurer, resigned in the middle, like kind of early summer, June, right? And so we're behind in a lot of areas as a result, so we're trying to catch up. And so, I think if we were to move to that model, I think what I would like to see then is just like a real clear set of guidelines about like what that, and maybe the auditor's report in some way is meant to do some of this, but just a clear set of like what should be reported in that. Is it about salaries lines specifically? Like what things are we looking at the quarter as stress points that we want to check in on regularly? Because if we're going to do it the entire budget every quarter, that's pretty gargantuan kind of conversation. So I want to be a little bit more targeted, probably, if we were to do something like that.
Yeah.
You know how
That
many
makes
lines
sense.
we have about?
No, I don't know.
There's a lot. There's a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot, right? So yeah, but I think it would be realistic to, somebody who has, some years could say like, here are the stress points, like these are consistent places where, where there's risk that's worth it to check in on a regular basis.
Okay.
I have another question for the chief. So all of our current citations now are going to municipal court.
Correct.
So none of our citations are going to mayor's court. Mayor's court has been non-existent since a couple ladies filed a lawsuit against the city, kept us from being able to run mayor's court. My understanding is we're still getting some funding from those citations at municipal court.
We do. The way it works now is you get the actual ticket cost back, but municipal court takes the court costs for themselves.
Okay, so they take the court costs, and then our officers going to court for those citations?
The prosecutor goes to court.
Okay.
No officers typically have to go.
Okay, so they're not driving, they don't have to drive down there.
No, unless they're in obscure circumstances where someone wants to go down in person and contest it. They've had to have an officer come in once or twice, but it's not a regular thing occurring.
Okay. So my thought here is just to see if there was additional expense that we were running into, having our officers having to be present, that's more time and fuel that we're spending for that, expensing for that. But so we have a shortfall. Do you know where we are in citations year to date, that what we've received monetary wise from that compared to what we would have maybe potentially a year ago from mayor's court?
No, I don't have a good figure on that currently, just because also mayor's court was sporadic, because there was breaks and not having a clerk versus having the clerk. When Jessica left, there was that break before we hired Bree, where there were issues going on with who was gonna preside over mayor's court for a while, even after that, so it's just been inconsistent, so it's hard to.
Because I think, my thought is that we're probably down from last year. And that'd be money that we would be helping offset your budget. So I was just kind of curious if we had
Those
any
good
numbers
budgets.
around.
I know Taylor had he would run a calculation previously for projected revenues from that and factor them into the budget based on what we projected.
Okay, very good,
So
thank
the
you.
projected revenues for citations is all, it gets accounted for a year.
Do you have any other specific, police and
I do
specific
not.
questions? Okay. I have two more questions. Is there currently a contingency line item, in department budgets, at least the police department, for overtime or unforeseen staffing costs?
There is a line item for overtime.
Well, I guess in relation to overtime, I was mostly wondering about unforeseen, like increases in that, but, I guess generally speaking, unforeseen staffing costs.
In terms of
Like
salary
a
or the other
contingency.
benefits.
That's either,
I guess you're just talking like if there's some major event and all of a sudden we have to have 8 officers on duty 24/7 for a week. To account for the increased salary costs that will create.
yeah, I suppose, because, I mean,
Yeah, so-
now understanding, how the CBA has changed, like salaries and benefits, it seems less likely that we'll be back here in a year having the same conversation. But in the unlikely event, like,
Yeah, so I know Taylor previously for every year he would factor in, I believe it was 15% on top of what he thought the salary costs were going to be. So he would factor in a buffer of 10 to 15%, I believe. And that was for every department, I think. You know, Jason, was that being pretty much so.
Cause I know we've got it worked into ours for salaries because of snow. You just never know when you're gonna have snow. We might have everybody in here working nonstop plowing and salting, so you always put a buffer in,
mhm,
be able to cover.
okay. But is that just for salary, or is it also,
I don't know.
Does
but
that
that's
factor
still
in
different
any-
to the other.
There's no contingency line item, and
Yeah.
it is in salary. Anything like that would be in the salary line.
okay,
But just figuring it out, 15% over adding that, same with the benefits, so that way it covers if it's needed, it could be.
so when, like, calculating the, staffing, the salary budget line item for an upcoming year, he would, factor 10 to 15% on top of what he already thought would,
Yes.
okay, sorry.
Does
Questions
that
are
answer,
hard.
does that answer your question?
Yes. Yes. Okay.
Just like with Devon, how they've cut out the overtime. In the last 5 years, we've cut out 90% of the overtime in the utility department, but it's all still factored because you never know what winter might bring. I mean, we might have 3 months of nonstop snow where the guys are out constant and getting all the overtime, so we've never been over. I mean, I understand you guys are a special case this year, the way the contracts went. Yeah, it's always worked out for us.
Okay. So I guess in this case, that 10 to 15% or whatever he put in to the staffing budget for the police department, as a buffer will have already been eaten up by this shortfall by the end of the year. Okay. Now, I'm wondering about, grant and other funding opportunities. Does the police department apply for the like Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistant Grant Program through the Department of Justice?
We have not.
Okay, I can send you whatever I find, like
So
information
that's
about
something I'm
that.
actually trying to work on.
Okay,
Ohio changed how we have to apply for those grants.
oh,
And we now have to use a new portal,
okay,
and it is tied to a UID number, a unique identity. I can't remember what the acronym stands for. However, the city has one, but it's only for the fire department. So we've got to get that set up for everyone.
Each department, you mean? Each department will
Well, you have to
their
set
own-
it one up for the city, and then you can make the individual departments subordinate to it, and then they get their own numbers that apply through the city. It's a little bit complicated. I don't fully understand it yet, but it needs figured out for everybody.
okay. Okay, that's, yeah, definitely worth working on, because there was, a few, I just made a quick search, and read through of things that are available, that staffing expenses would qualify as, qualified expenses under the grant. That was one, the community-oriented policing services or COPS hiring grants was another. I guess that's not really as applicable here, but they probably have other things going on. The Ohio Violent Crime Reduction grants as well, but I'm assuming that all of those, your ability to look into and apply for all of those kind of boils down to having that UIE number. Okay.
And I believe I looked at the violent crime reduction grant,
Mhm.
and I don't remember that it stood out immediately that it would be applicable to us, but I'll look
Okay.
at that one again.
Yeah, that makes sense.
A lot of the current staffing and funding grants for police departments are going out to helping staff multi-jurisdictional task forces, basically. So we wouldn't necessarily qualify for those or be a direct beneficiary of those. It have to be from a larger agency applying and basically tagging us along.
Okay. Okay, those are all the questions that I had at this moment. I think we would really like to see, a more realistic, number that, the council would have to consider appropriating that factors in, whether or not there's anything that can be moved around, and also a buffer, just in case. Once we are able to review those numbers, we'll be able to revisit this.
Yeah, well, I'll take a second look just to confirm that there isn't anything in that fund that can be, I mean, or any funds really that can't realistically be moved, and then, I'll get you all an email by tomorrow.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So 2020, sorry,
I did have the one more budget item for the police department.
okay, yeah,
Right.
let's,
My fuel line item is coming up around $6,000 short for the year. Yeah, contrary to voice, we
I
actually. The problem with the fuel line item is my fuel budget for the last 2 years has decreased $10,000.
Okay,
So it's been steady, it's decreased $5,000 the last 2 years.
okay, yeah,
Why
so,
is that? Were we anticipating less? Were we anticipating fuel prices being down, or were we anticipating?
I don't know Taylor's exact, I believe the first year from 23 to 24, our total usage was down, but we had almost half staffing for periods of time, so we were driving less. But otherwise, fuel's been up, and fuel costs weren't down much from last year. I think that possibly was a factor, that fuel costs were anticipated to go down, but they.
Was there a new agreement, or is that a different department for
We did,
purchasing for?
we switched from going to Speedway to buying bulk fuel from Randy Moore. That was a small savings.
Okay, I was under the
No.
impression that that was part of it, but maybe not, okay.
Do you have a bulk tank out back too then?
Yeah,
Nice.
it holds about 1,200 gallons, so we fill that up about once a month. It's around 800-ish gallons of fuel, costs about $200.
So maybe the savings from that were overestimated from the budget.
I think the combination of the savings from that and anticipated fuel costs, but we're about $6,000 short.
okay,
You're good at the moment. You're just going to be short at the end of the year, right? I mean, how much more do you have?
I have one more. So we just ordered fuel. So we'll be set on fuel until,
About another month.
for about another month going into November. And then we have about $1,000 left.
okay.
That makes sense.
Do either of you want to
Yeah, I'll motion.
take action on that today
Yeah,
or wait
I
until
would.
we're?
I'd give them the fuel. That way we don't, that's taken care of. So yeah, I would, that's what I would propose.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Me too, just for the sake of, it. Not falling through the cracks, if it gets pushed off, to a future meeting. So I'll, notify Mr. Rowe, that we need to, amend appropriations and ordinance. Is it 7:30? It's not time for me to start sundowning yet. Okay, that's fine. And that sounds pretty realistic, for another 3 months of the year, if you're spending about $2,000 a month. Okay. Shall we talk?
If we're going to do that for the police department on a fuel as an appropriations, maybe we could check with the other, service.
We're good now.
Okay,
Yeah.
and, fire department.
We were gonna fall short, but we had some line items in the same area where we were able to move money into fuel.
Maybe you could, check with Chief, Barber and see where he's at also. That way we could take care of it in one shot.
Yeah, we were
Okay.
gonna be a whole fuel. And how to say, it. We needed one more fill up,
Okay,
so on all the fuels.
Yeah, I mean, at a quick glance, it looks like fire's gonna need some too, so I'll talk with Chief Barber.
Okay, thank you. Actually, with that in mind, I was wondering if we could reopen discussion on the, code enforcement fuel cost appropriations. Is that okay with you guys?
Sure.
Okay. So we discussed $1,000, last time we met. And then I was reviewing the video. It sounded like they had $250 budgeted at the beginning of the year. Austin was only hired in like May-ish. So since then, there's been $140 spent, and another $45 encumbered. So of what they had budgeted at the beginning of the year, they have like 65 left unencumbered. And they've, so over the last 2 or 3 months, that's like an average of 60-ish to 90-ish dollars spent per month on fuel by the code officer. And there's only 4 months left of the year, even counting this month, even though it's almost half over, it's half over. In light of all the other appropriation requests and budget adjustments that we're gonna be considering, $500 isn't much to quabble about, but it's something. And I'm wondering if it would be a mistake to overshoot by that much, with this appropriation, like, as we're calculating the budget for next year and all of that as well.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah,
I don't know if you agree with this or not. He's code enforcement officer. Why isn't there money just put out there for fuel, but Devin gets it, because we get it at bulk pricing? And he fills up out of the tank out back. Instead of going to the gas station to get it.
I was thinking along the same
Because like
lines.
the fuel I buy, it's all the utilities, so it's water, sewer, it's a water plant, sewer plant, they all get it out of that tank, out of my tanks. So if there was, say, $1,000 encumbered for code enforcement, make that available to Devin, so when Devin buys fuel, he takes some of that money, because that's the same way I do it.
Code officer technically falls underneath your department anyway, doesn't it?
Yeah,
No.
I think,
No, it's in the manager's
code
office.
is actually funded, is code funded by all 3 funds? I think it's a mixing of funds.
It just doesn't make sense to me, even if he got it from our tanks, it doesn't make sense why he's got cars and going to the gas station
I
when we
agree.
get bulk fuel prices.
I agree. I think that should be all city vehicles, really. But the other question I had, which I thought of, this was the first thing I thought of was, has he not been driving around as much because he hasn't had money in his budget? Because he's driving city vehicle when he's going around, so is he keeping his travel around the city minimized because he doesn't have money to refuel? So is he planning on driving more or anticipating driving more once money's in that line item, is my question, right? Because there was probably that much money in the budget for code because our previous code officer wasn't getting out in the public that often.
Previous code officers didn't have a city vehicle, they're driving a
Right.
car, filling up with their own money.
Yeah,
So there's the other part of it. I don't know why code wasn't using the truck before. That truck was sitting there when the last code officer also,
As
so.
long as it's,
It's not, so like with mine, we use water plant, sewer plant, street, sewer collections, and water distribution. So I've got 5 fuel funds that I pull from. And it to just keep fueling the tanks and at the end of the year, it washes out. This year, we were gonna be a whole fill up of diesel, off-road diesel and gas short. So we were able to move some money around to get it in the fuel where I can do that now, but it only makes sense that it's a city truck.
So I got a question now because we have bulk. I'm all for the bulk because you're gonna definitely have the savings.
Mhm.
But with the bulk, are we logging which vehicle we're filling up?
Yes.
Okay, so as long as we're logging it and we're tracking it, then we also know then how much fuel he's actually
How much does
using.
code cost, how much is water, how much?
So I'm all for that. Simplification, but you're tracking it, you know exactly where it's going.
Yeah, like.
And I think it's important that the code officer is using the city vehicle when he's out and about.
In utilities, just like PD, you guys they're numbered, so you have to put the number when you get fuel. But all of our equipment, the mowers are numbered, so if somebody pulls a zero turn up back there to fill it up,
You're putting it
it's
up.
numbered. So when that's all wrote down, then you know where everything's at.
So essentially in 2026, what we're talking about is either not having a fuel line for the code office or having it be zeroed out, and he would get fuel from.
Yeah, I think
He
for
can
this year, leave it
Oh,
for
yeah,
this
this year,
year.
yeah, I'm
I would
saying
leave it for this year.
2026.
I would propose it
He
for
can-
next year.
There could still be a line,
Yeah,
there could still have
sure.
a fuel line, just depending on which tanks he gets out of, whether it's utilities or PD. Then Devin or myself is gonna have access to that one line item.
Mhm.
So when we do fuel,
Okay.
we can factor that in and pool.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I would not worry about it for this budget
Yeah.
year, though. I would
Oh, yeah.
propose that all for next year's budget proposal.
So it's a lot more convenient, it's here, you're not.
No, that's all, it's a huge amount of fuel, so making it less complicated for everyone's.
Yeah, I like, that idea for the 2026 budget and beyond. Yes, in terms of right now, though, do you think $1,000 is appropriate, or should we try to
I
make
wouldn't,
it more realistic?
I wouldn't worry about it. I think it's fine. I think that they're probably just guesstimating, just to make sure they got enough to get through the year, end of the year.
They definitely will have enough to get through the end of the year, that's what they said.
Yeah, so I think that's, I think that's fine.
Okay.
Because that money will just remain,
Yeah, I don't anticipate that, they're not gonna say, oh, I have $1,000 of fuel money, I'm gonna use $1,000 of fuel money.
Okay.
They're gonna be conservative.
but it also means that they can.
And they have the leeway to get out and do more as well.
Technically, you're gonna be increasing their budget anyway in that line item, because it's only budgeted for 250 this year, and you can bump it up to 500 next year, and you might already have funds there to do that for next year, and won't have to appropriate any additional money.
Shall we move on to 2026 budget?
Yeah, so when I was young and naive 2 weeks ago, I had stars in my eyes about coming in here with a pretty little budget draft. But that's not happened. So one thing I didn't understand was I thought that we just had August reconciliations to do, but in fact we had June and July reconciliations as well. And they're pretty hairy. So we're making our way through that, and I anticipate we'll have everything reconciled by the end of next week. And so what I've done here, and I've given you, is just a timeline for, laying out my process for how I want to approach the budget. And I invite you to hold me accountable to this. This is what we're targeting. I got input from Taylor, and he said it's ambitious but doable. And so this is basically my approach. I want to reach out to the department heads at the end of this week to just solicit input. This doesn't mean that we're making any promises, but just to get them involved in the conversation. What do you need? I'll hand them their 2025 budget, like a fresh version of it. No projections. We have a bunch of money or we have no money. It's just, this is what you had, what worked, what didn't. I'll coalesce their input and bring it to you along with an initial 2026 draft that incorporates revenue projections, cost increase projections. Taylor has a bit of a template for doing this. So I'll be working off of the template. He's also offered to help me craft it a little bit. So I'll coordinate with him a little bit. And so I hope to have that by October 10th. That's my target. And so that in addition to the revenue projections, it'll say basically whether we're in a cutting posture or a spending posture. Any key stress points that are hey, this is a problem area that we need to, so police salary will be one. We need to pay attention to that and get that one right this time. And a little narrative just saying hey, this is the general direction that we see, how we see 2026 working out. And at that point, then I'll rely on the finance committee and council at large to give additional direction on, my obligation is really to give you a balanced thing at the end and for every salary line, and to give my best kind of advice on how we get there. But the decision's up to you all. So we'll make adjustments according to your judgment. Any questions?
No, I think you're good. Will we have, so typically, Taylor had been doing the auditor's report at the second meeting of each month. So based on your timeline here, it doesn't look like McCray would have his. So we're 3 months behind there, but you wouldn't have any of those months available that we might be able to?
Oh, well, I think we'll have June and July done this week.
Okay, very good.
June is, we're $2,000 away from having that zeroed out.
Okay.
So we're really close, and that's the worst one by far. So July, I think, I really want to have done this week. And then I really don't know about August yet. But I think one more week in August. And Taylor was like, I'm sorry, June, this is the worst bank reconciliation month of my entire career, and it just ended up on your plate. So so it's a tricky one, but we're getting through it. And yeah, so I think, I really can't speak to McCray's part. We did have him down here for one day while we work on a lot of June. So he's not been totally out of the loop, but he's definitely also getting up to speed just like I am. So I can't speak to where the state of his treasurer's report will be.
Very good. Well, that would be good if we could just maybe,
Yeah.
Address some of it.
Oh, yeah,
so we
we'll
don't
make
end up
forward
with
progress for
another,
sure.
and get some of them taken care of. So, okay. And then you think you'll be, on Monday, you'll be able to have your, August, auditor's report then, or?
Oh, yeah, I'll have something. Yep.
Okay, good. Awesome. And, I noticed on here, so your, point to, we are still on schedule for the budget is accurate, because I don't know how many years we've actually tried to start the process earlier.
Yeah.
We've always seemed to be adopting in November.
Yeah.
So it's always something comes
Well,
up.
if I'm here,
And-
I'll,
So
if I'm around next year, like, let's do it. Let's get it.
I won't be here, so I wish you best of luck. No, it always just seems like something comes up, and we always, everything.
I mean, part of it is the practicality that you can't do reliable projections until August.
Yeah.
So like that, you can't do it earlier than August, and that's, there's a lot of work in between August 31st and getting to a point where you can put something out there.
No, I think it'll be great. I totally understand where you're at. So I appreciate you, being such a quick study. So that's great. So, well, good. I am excited. So
Yeah,
budget time is always fun. It's always fun.
so the first meeting in November, we should have the initial budget in front of us.
Oh,
The first meeting in October, it looks like, is your
Well,
goal.
it's
Initial review.
yeah, I don't know when the first finance committee will fall. But yeah, October 10th is my target to have a first draft.
The initial draft.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That
If,
would be great.
Fantastic.
when those are, coming up though, if it's possible to have that email to us before,
Oh,
like a day, at least a day before
Absolutely.
the committee
Yeah.
meeting,
Oh, of course. Yeah.
only just so we
That's
have
all
a
I
chance
can,
to
I
maybe
guess.
review before we actually come to the meeting. One thing Taylor did, I thought was really good, was basically he would, if there was anything glaring from last year to this year kind of
Highlight
thing,
it.
he kind of highlighted and said, okay, here's what we're,
Yep.
if you'll notice, this is a major change. Like for instance, this 26 major change will be salary line items
Right,
for police and fire,
right.
for sure.
Yep.
So, which we do know that, but in case there's anything else that we
Yeah,
may
of
know.
course, yeah, just what are the headlines? Yep.
So,
Yeah, this answers pretty much all the questions that I had about the,
And I'm open to input on this, by the way, like this, I mean, this was as much for me as it was for you, just to like gather my thoughts and understand like who does what, where, and, just try to get a clear kind of path forward.
thank you.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts about
None at this time.
this? Yeah. Yeah, like I was saying, it answers a lot of, all of the questions that I was prepared to ask tonight about tasks and timeline and whether or not we're on target given years past. So,
I'm sorry, it's not a 2026 budget, but it's the
That's-
next best thing, right?
yeah, it is. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's
So-
okay, I already blamed Taylor that he didn't have the budget template in front of us before he left, so it's okay, you're off the hook. So. And I hope he's watching.
Now, at our last finance committee meeting, we talked about approaching, the law director about reviewing past, like, end of year reconciliation type ordinances.
So I found the 2022 one. This is, I couldn't find a one later, so sorry, but just so you can at least get, I mean, I think Corey and Greg have seen that, or Mr. Taylor and Mr. Clement have seen that before, but so as a frame of reference.
Okay,
I don't think it's changed much from year to year, but
okay. This doesn't seem like anything we're going to need to do anything with right at this moment, so I think I'm gonna take my time
yeah.
reviewing this,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
since you guys are
And it's
already
easier to
familiar with it.
explain, honestly, closer to
then-
the end of the year too,
Okay.
like,
Yeah.
I think it will inevitably, people will be like, why are you doing that? And it always takes some explaining, so
Okay,
Yeah.
the closer you are to the end of the year, the easier it is to connect the dots.
Yeah, and Taylor has had to do that, every year, explain it, because it'll come up every year and it's the same explanation and, but yeah, it's just a formality that we do at the end of each year and just, people aren't aware of it and the wording is a little,
Yeah, and this year is gonna be
Legally.
unique with, doing it by the end of December.
November, you mean?
possibly.
Possibly.
Or, yeah, well, sure, yeah, possibly, yeah.
thank you for that. The last thing that I had on the agenda tonight, was reviewing, comparisons of council pay for similar communities in Ohio. I think, if I remember right about our discussion of this at the last committee meeting, Mr. Holmes was going to look into that, or were you going to look into that, Mr. Smith? Okay, so without him present, I haven't had the time to look into it myself. So I don't have.
Make it worthwhile and I'll consider running again. I'm kidding. I'm just kidding.
Do either of you have any thoughts on the matter?
Yeah, I would like to have the answer and the direction, obviously, to punch it in to the budget for 26. If it's going to, be something we consider.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I think I mean, obviously you're not doing it. If you're here now, you're not doing it for the money, which is, in my opinion, how it should be anyway. It's for civic responsibility. It's for the betterment of the community. Although it is, well, and it has been, it's not always been this way, but the last 2 years has been a lot more work, a lot more time, a lot more meetings. Which it shouldn't be that way. It typically is not required to operate a city. I feel like it's just, there's been too much other stuff that's, put into play or in some cases micromanaging. I feel that's why you have an administration that you pay to run the city. But it is a lot of work and I think it does, it is headache. You do take a lot of public scrutiny, and I think that deters people. And then, of course, you only get $100 a month. So is it worth the headache in their mind, right? So even if you doubled it, might be more enticing. It's still, it's never, to my knowledge, it's never changed since
No, it has not
so-
since the charter went in place.
So in 30 years, it's never increased. So,
The cost of living has, and even though, nobody should take public office or seek public office, like, for the money, it's still a barrier. Like, if it's this close to volunteer work, it's a barrier for people who can't afford to
Donate that much of their time.
donate that time, and they need to use it elsewhere in their lives. So I am still open-minded about the idea, and I'd like to look at what's realistic, compared against what we can afford, and
Sure.
see
So-
what the rest of the council thinks.
This is just a side comment, but when I served on, council in the community I grew up in Iowa, and this was in the 1980s, we received $20 a month. So,
I'd be curious to see what they're making now.
it's probably not a whole lot more. I will find out though. Now you've tweaked my interest, so, yeah, $100, it's just a token actually. So, if it would entice more people to step forward, I think it could be a good thing.
I agree, definitely. There was one other thing that I had on the, that we had on the agenda, that went out in the public notice, and that was the Majestic Galleries request for funding for Sober Jam sessions. They actually reached back out to us and asked if, that discussion could be postponed to the next, finance committee meeting. So they can be more prepared to give us, all of the information that we might need, to consider that request. So I noticed that there are going to be, it's another weird month where there's like 3 weeks between the last, or there's an extra week between the last council meeting of September and the first council meeting of October. At this point, do we have any guesses on whether committee meetings will be held the last week of September or the first week of October?
Typically, it's the week before the council,
The week before the council meeting, okay.
but that doesn't mean we can't change that. There's nothing set in stone on it.
Okay,
I think part of it for this particular time frame would be if, the auditor has any questions or needs something from the finance committee for the budget. That could factor into it also.
we can probably assume the first week of October then, since it's the week before the council meeting. And that benefits, Majestic Galleries folks, and that benefits you and your budget preparations. But if appropriations requests come in that are urgent or anything like that, we can talk next week about the possibility of calling one earlier. Are there any other pending, like, appropriations requests that have been brought to your attention? I am not aware of any. Okay. No. Are either of you aware of any other items that might require the finance committee's attention?
Not that I know of.
I know we have some fence quotes that Parks and Rec talked about.
Yes.
And I know that
They
they were
are-
hoping to talk to Fred more about it, but
Mhm.
I think that, I'd like to see him move forward with, I like to, if they don't do the ball fields, the baseball field, probably, I'd like to see it, it's always nice if you can get it done in the off season. I'm nervous if they wait till spring, and if we put it in the budget for next spring, I'm nervous that it won't get done before they really start,
Right,
and
and then it'll interrupt.
yeah, and then we're tearing up the field and stuff, so, it'd be nice to kind of get that work potentially done. And it sounds like, Mr. Cohen needs to contact the fence company about possibly utilizing some of the fence that's already there, and then, and see if that's a more cost-effective option for the city. But I'd like to see that done at Nelson Commons, the fencing completed, so we can keep moving forward on the playground or project that could be next year or following year, just depending on the funding cycle, et cetera.
Yeah,
And then see the ball fields completed so they can utilize them next year.
yeah, I agree. I think that's something that we should keep an eye on, and as more information becomes available about whether or not any of the existing fencing can be incorporated into the plan or, other factors that they're waiting on clarification for, I'd like to
See that happen too.
Yeah.
Other than that, I don't think there's anything else.
I don't believe so, that's not for me.
Great. Well, the time is 8:01 PM. And I call this finance committee meeting adjourned. All in favor?
I think
Right.